Hello, this is Luke Turner, and welcome back to another episode of Building an Exercise Tracking Web App from Scratch. So let's start with our usual stuff here. Whoops. Run the database, run the client-side code bundler, open up a new tab, run the server. Okay, and then we should be able to open that in our browser. Yep, here we are. Okay, so what are we going to do today? Let's see, yesterday we refactored the front end to use Alpine.js. I seem to recall that I started on something at the end with this ESBuild switch off branch, but I'm not going to really worry about that today. The only point of actually switching off ESBuild was to experiment with the bun bundler and to remove a dependency. But didn't really feel like it was worth it because I had to change the format of the outputted JavaScript, and there were some things that kind of weren't working. So I think it was like loading the script asynchronously because it was a module or something like that. I don't really know how that works. In any case, we could work on that some more. We could do some of these other ideas here. But, I was thinking about this a little bit before the stream. I think this is episode 20 that we're doing of this right now. So because each one is more than 2 hours, at the beginning of episode 20, you've probably spent more than 40 hours on this app so far. Bit of a milestone. And I was thinking, I don't really know, is 40 hours a long time to spend on an app, or is that not very long? Usually when I'm working on things for myself, I'm not even really thinking about how long I'm spending on them. If it's just a side project, I'm just like banging away, right? And not really timing it. So that's an interesting thing about this streaming stuff to me, is like I'm actually timing how long it's taking me to make progress here. I feel like 40 hours doesn't seem like very long for building an app. But it's a fairly simple app, so that makes sense. But I was also thinking, 40 hours, not very long for building an app, but for a side project where you're just kind of trying to have fun, at a certain point, you want to draw the line, right? And we've talked about this before, this what do I need to ship section. It's like, what is the most important thing that needs to be done in order for me to feel comfortable shipping the app, is what this was before. And now I kind of want to think about it in another way, which is like, what do we need to do in order for me to be comfortable wrapping it up, like working on something else? Eventually, for the stream, I'm going to be switching probably to another app or another project once this one is done. So the question is, what does it take to get us there, right? There's nothing wrong with fiddling around with adding new things or doing stuff where it's not delivering value, but it should be done at least deliberately. That's kind of the way I think about it. It's fine to work on other stuff, but you should at least understand what the biggest problems inside are when you're building your app. Okay. So let's think, what do we actually need to ship this app? Let's actually bring up the app. So one thing is the manual needs to be improved. And I've actually started on this a little bit off stream. I mentioned this when I worked on the manual before, but it's hard for me to write and talk at the same time, right? If I'm writing this manual, probably I'm going to need to either do that off stream or just be like on stream, not really talking, or just reading out loud what I'm writing kind of thing. But this is one of the things that we want to improve. So let's, put this in here, like complete the manual. And it doesn't need to have a ton of detail, but I like to at least have a bit of a description, a bit of an explanation. Like you can't assume that the user is going to immediately know what to do. In this case, the app is simple enough that maybe they will, but I like to practice the assumption that they won't, if that makes sense. Right. What else? I do also think, style-wise, there's some things we need to do yet. So like style or UI adjustments. And I'm just going to kind of put that as a big group because ultimately it's like you could keep working on that sort of thing forever. I don't want to draw a hard line, but I do think that there are some things that we need to improve with that. One of them is, another thing is like dark mode and responsive mode. Fixes, I guess, basically. So the app, it's got this light and dark mode functionality. Light mode, dark mode. Some things look a little weird in dark mode because it was originally written for light mode. Similarly, we've got this responsive view. If we go this thing, it works, right? It actually is responsive, but there's some things that might look a little funny. And that's kind of what we might want to suss out is like, are there any changes here we could do to make stuff a little better in responsive view or not? And even just looking at this, you can see that like, yeah, probably. There's probably some problems. These are like, this is like a light mode, dark mode thing. If I switch to light mode, that just blends in. This is like a drag anchor. So if I add another set here, they can actually be like drag and dropped. Another one is like dark mode persistence. This is not a huge deal, but it is something I'd like to do. We talked about this a little bit with, well, in an earlier stream at some point. I don't really remember. But, you saw there, like if I refresh the page, it goes to dark mode because that's what my browser is using. If I switch it to light mode, that's fine. But if I refresh the page or browse to another page or something, it's actually just going to switch right back to the browser default. So the light mode, dark mode thing is not persisted anywhere. Could be in local storage that could be persisted, or it could be persisted on the actual user record itself. Let's see what else. So I feel like a lot of the main functionality is actually fine. Like if we look down here at these ideas, a lot of these ideas are adding things that the app does not need. Like shareable links, where you could be like, hey, check out this workout I did the other day. And you could share a link to that. That would be a nice feature. Is it part of the core functionality of the app? No. Similarly with like routine support. Or like adding standard format exports. Those are things where it's like they would be nice to haves, but are they required? No. Associating a timestamp with each set? I don't know. That might be interesting to have. It doesn't feel like a requirement though. And I feel like the same thing goes for pretty much all of these. Like there's nothing in here that needs to block us completing the work on the app. These are mostly just here, like if we want additional things to do, there's some ideas, right? This one actually, I might want to, this one's actually done. This one I might want to do. So let's say support aggregate analysis of historical data, right? Like somebody can look at the historical data for a particular exercise and see what it's been over time. But there's nothing to tell you like, oh, in this time window, what was your average? What was your highest? Like your 1 rep max or whatever, your personal best. So that's something that I would like to have in here, just as well as showing the raw data, also show some like useful calculations. Yeah. Beyond that, we also have some of the stuff in next actions here. So monitoring is something that I want to have for sure. So let's put that up here as well. Add some kind of monitoring. Ideally. We'll kind of see what options we have for that when we go to implement it. I tend to be a little bit opinionated. Like I don't really like to implement client-side monitoring in my apps for privacy reasons, but we'll see what we have to see there. Fix back buttons. This one I actually want to do as well. Fix back buttons. Clean up landing page. It's this here. We do want to do that as well, for sure. And these other things, I mean, fix issues with dark mode, we already have. We already have that. Already have that. You know, what do we need to ship? Move client-side dependencies to dev dependencies. Stop loading table or icons from CDN. Like these are technical, you can't even really call them fixes, sort of just best practice things that we could do. But they're not required for shipping. But we might do them anyway at some point. Okay. Anyway, so here we are. We've got a list of some things that we want to do in order to ship. So now kind of what I like to do is basically just pick things off the list and make some progress. So let's start by thinking about trying to decide which of these I want to do first. I kind of want to, so clean up landing page, we want to do at the bottom. That's kind of going to be at the end. Fix back buttons would be a good thing to do, and monitoring would be a good thing to do. We did a lot of front end work last time. Let's do some monitoring stuff and talk about that a little bit. Okay, so what do I mean by monitoring? Let's set a little bit of a ground floor here or whatever, a shared expectation. So with monitoring, you know, it's easy to forget when you're writing an app that it's not just code, right? Like I'm writing this code, I'm shipping that code to GitHub or whatever, and it's like, that's your app. It's the code in GitHub, right? But of course, that's not your actual app. Your actual app is this running container or whatever it is that's running on some computer somewhere in the cloud. Or maybe if you have a home lab, it's running in your house, you know? And that service that's running and keeping track of and maintaining that is a skill set all of its own. And I like to think of a running service as almost like a living thing. You know, it's like it needs care, it needs maintenance, it needs attention. And it's not always going to work the way that you expect it to, right? So having said all that, one of the most important things when you're actually running an app in a production setting especially is observability. So what this means is the code might look like it should work, but do you know whether the app itself is actually working? Do you know whether users are having problems? How many users do you have? What are they doing? Is the app nearing any limits or thresholds that you need to be aware of, like disk space usage, etc.? How much is it going to cost you, you know, to continue to run it? Are you earning enough to like make back the cost of running the app? Stuff like that, right? You got to know all that. Now, for a side project like this one, my expectations for monitoring are lower. I'm not necessarily going to need to know because I don't really have I have no SLA. There's no guarantee that this app is going to be continuing to run. SLA, by the way, that stands for service level agreement. If you're not familiar, if you actually have a company, usually you have a service level agreement with your customers where you say our app is going to be up or is going to be working for the core functionality that you need 99.95% of the time or something like that. For this, there is no SLA. And in fact, I can almost guarantee that eventually, some number of years in the future, it's going to just stop working one day when I stop paying for it or switch hosting providers or something like that. So we don't necessarily need super granular, accurate monitoring, but we should at least do something. Okay, so when it comes to monitoring and observability, there's kind of a couple different options. Usually there's logging, and there's metrics, and there's tracing, and sometimes tracing can kind of be incorporated into the other two, but it's sort of a specialized type of thing. And beyond that, maybe some other types of things have, like thinking of like Elixir or something like that, where you can actually connect to your running container, open up basically like a terminal in the process and inspect like the other agents and stuff in that process, the other processes technically, I guess. But, so there you can like observe the actual running of the program using this language specific set of APIs. That's also sometimes a thing. But usually, we're talking logging, we're talking metrics. And once you have logging and metrics, the next step is usually alerts. We're not going to do any alerts. So logging is easy. Let's think about metrics a little bit. So let's actually open Fly, because I don't really know how this works myself. But Fly does have like a metrics thingy. If I click metrics here, it's got some basic monitoring, some basic observability set up for me already. And I can actually view this stuff in Grafana somewhere. I guess that thing. And this is basically like a managed Grafana instance thing that Fly creates for me. Don't really know, but it's really nice because hosting Grafana yourself can be a kind of a pain in the butt. So having Fly actually just host this Grafana thing for you is really convenient. And, you can see it already has these metrics being published. And in theory, like I could create alerts in this Grafana instance, I believe, that would like send a notification to, whatever paging application or Amazon SNS, to send me a text or something like that. But I'm not going to do any of that because I don't really care that much about whether the app is working, because it's just that side project level. If it's not a side project, my policy is usually something like, I would rather the app tell me there's a problem than a customer tell me there's a problem, right? I would rather be paged and notified that there was an error and have to deal with that than not do that, pretend that it's not an issue, or sort of just brush it under the table or under the rug. And then later, maybe a customer will be complaining about it. They'll be like, hey, this hasn't worked for days. Like, why not? And then you have to fix it with some urgency, Whereas if you discover it, obviously you still have to fix it, but there's less urgency related to it potentially. And you can actually fix it promptly within your SLA window and so on. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. So the problem with these metrics that are published by Fly is they don't really have like the details from the application level about what is going on. I can see like, oh, there's some load, which is great, but I can't tell like, okay, how many users are using it? What are they doing? Stuff like that, right? It's kind of at the wrong level of abstraction for understanding how the app is being used. So Fly does have this ability to publish metrics. And my understanding here is basically you, well, I'm kind of reading the docs at the same time as trying to talk because I don't really know how this works. But I think it's like you just create this Prometheus endpoint in your app. And the way Prometheus works, it's like your app exposes an endpoint that provides some information, and then it just gets queried on an intermittent basis by something else. And that's how the metrics are discovered. And then I think Fly will sort of automatically query those things. And then it should sort of just work, hopefully. Like I'm kind of thinking about this, like pre-configured Prometheus data source, built-in metrics. Okay, does it talk about custom metrics? Yeah, custom metrics. Okay. Fly apps can expose a metrics endpoint will automatically scrape every 15 seconds. Okay. So this is the kind of thing that we'll be adding. I'm going to go ahead and copy this and put it into my fly.toml. And what we're going to need to do now is actually expose this endpoint and have it return, whatever is the Kubernetes, or pardon me, the Prometheus like standard metrics format thingy. Let's see what these links go to. So we need some kind of library for that. Like I'm not going to handwrite the Prometheus logic, right? I'm going to use some kind of built-in JavaScript library where I can just publish metrics and it automatically gets sort of aggregated and exposed in a way that Prometheus understands. So, here there's like a Node.js Prometheus client, it looks like. What is this called? Prom client? I wonder, something like this could be an option. So if we look at how this works, basically, Okay, so basically we just create the client and then we, publish our metrics. And is that it? Do I have to do anything else? I wonder. Don't know. Okay, so that's an option. What are exporters? Export existing metrics from third-party systems. Okay, so these are like exporting metrics from other open source tools into like a Prometheus format, I guess. I don't know if any of these are really going to make sense for what we're looking for here. It's a lot of options, though. A lot of irrelevant options. Okay. And then what's this Swagger stats one? So this sounds kind of interesting because it's node aware or express aware. What stats does this expose? Metrics, storing I don't need details about that. So it uses Prom client under the hood. I don't want to need a swagger.json kind of thing. Yeah, let's not do that for now. I think that's going to be overkill for what we're looking for. Let's go ahead and try just using prom client here and see if we can get some metrics published and what that looks like. Okay, so one other thing I want to check, if I look at npm prom client, does this have, yeah, plenty of downloads? Seems like the kind of standard solution probably. Okay, so let's go ahead and install that. Let's just close that for a moment. Bun install prom client. Okay. So now how do we use this thing? See example folder for a sample usage. Respond to Prometheus's scrape request with the result of await registry.metrics. Okay. Seems simple enough. So we're basically going to need to add a route for that just calls that function, it sounds like, which shouldn't be too bad. It's kind of complicated looking, actually. So what type of library? So this is using Express. I don't know what cluster even is. What is that used for here? If cluster.isWorker. Okay, yeah, don't need to worry about that. Let's just copy all this and we can start messing with it a little bit. So I'm going to make a new file here called metrics.ts. Okay, so basically we're going to want to do something kind of similar to what we have for these other routes, where we are going to create a new router for metrics and we're going to add that router to our main router. So like const router equals router, and then router.getMetrics, router.getMetrics counter. So this, set content type register. I don't know what these mean. So I don't even know if we need this because it seems to be just doing this one test counter thing. Let's just comment that out for now. Definitely don't need any of that because we're actually just going to be exporting this router. And let's call it something else. Let's call it metrics router. And then we're going to import that over here. So this is not going to be requiring authentication at all. And we're going to need some way of protecting it, though. So I don't really know exactly what that's going to look like. Metrics router. We want it to be available like within the Fly private network maybe, but not the public, which might be a bit of a challenge. We'll see. Okay. So if we actually look at the rest of this like placeholder code in here, so this is just like doing some random stuff. We can get rid of all that. Get rid of all that and get rid of all that and get rid of all that. So I kind of want to see, let's get rid of that and that and that. And like, what is this? //register. Oh, so that's interesting. So this is actually, the code in these examples directory is actually importing with a relative path to the module instead of like importing it from node modules. Probably they have some kind of CI/CD reason from that, but like if I could do import register from prom client, that's kind of the equivalent, and collect default metrics as well, get imported from there. That would be like that. And then we would also get like histogram, counter, gauge, just kind of just get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that. So basically there's two things going on here. There's creating the router that's exposing the metrics route, and then there's also defining the metrics that we're actually going to, use. One of the things I'm wondering is like, if we go back to the example here, like we're creating these things, but we're not explicitly adding them to the registry or anything like that. So it must be something that's happening automatically maybe. So let's just call this, let's just use this test counter thing. And, I could like export const test counter. This is interesting. Collect is invoked each time register.metrics is called. Okay, whatever. Gonna have a bit of Prometheus learning to do here. In the past, I've used statsd for metrics and kind of similar things. So probably a little bit similar, but not that similar. Okay, so now, I can go, let's say we're in, let's just go to the today page. And I'm going to add a metric that's like test counter dot inc. We're just incrementing this thing. So whenever somebody visits this page, that counter value should be incremented +1. Okay, so with that, I mean, we should have something doing something because we added the metrics route. So let's actually see what happens here. So if I go to the today page, and then if I do /metrics, what do we see? Bunch of stuff, eh? So it's got a lot of like the default metrics, and then test counter 1 at the very bottom. So now if I go to the today page again, which I just did, and I refresh this, maybe I have to refresh the today page. Yeah. And then forward, refresh. Yeah. Now it's up to 2. So the metric's working. So one problem though now is what I just talked about, where it's like, how do we secure this page? Oh, it looks like there's a section here. Okay. I literally had it right open. Very convenient. So authentication is what we need. The problem here is like this metrics page includes information that we don't want regular users of the app to be able to see. So a full access token can be generated and then passed as a bearer token. Create an org restricted token. Okay, so no, this is this is authenticating to the Prometheus API from the outside, not from your app, I think. Hmm. Hmm. Okay, let's just try it. So in order to actually see how this works, we're going to need to deploy it. I don't really want all of these default metrics in there when I'm deploying it. All of these things, not necessarily that big of a deal, but I just want to limit that as much as possible while I'm in the testing phase. So the collect default metrics piece, we will take out. Let's just comment that out. And now if I refresh this, it just has that one counter. And there's nothing in there. But if I refresh this page and then refresh this, now it's got that test counter one. Okay. Oh. So fine. Let's do a commit here so we can get this deployed. Couple commits. So first we're going to be adding add prom client. And one other thing though, like the port, like maybe I should be just using a different port. Genius idea. I know. Okay. So let's think about that for a moment. I don't think there's any problem with actually just making 2 Express apps here. So let's do that. Metrics app. And I could do this in the actual metrics module, but usually if something is like a side effecting thing like listening on a port, running, a server, I don't like to just do that in a submodule. Usually it gets confusing when other people are trying to maintain your code. They're like, oh, it's running on this port, but then like secretly it's also running on this other port that you don't know about. It's not obvious. But if it's all kind of in this bootstrap file or whatever you want to call it, then it makes it a little more obvious what your app is actually doing. Okay, so let's let's just do it like this. Metrics port equals 3001. Sure. And metrics app.use metrics router. Prometheus metrics listening on port metrics port. Okay, so now I think that should work. So now if I do this, oh, it still has something because I have to remove it from the router. Let's get rid of that here and get rid of that here. Okay. So now this is giving me a 404. If I do 3001, it's giving me the route or, the actual metrics. The advantage of this is like if we look at this fly.toml, the internal port that's being exposed as an HTTP service is 3000. So if we just do 3001 down here instead, that server is not going to be exposed to the internet. So we're not going to need any authentication or anything like that on this route because it's just not going to be able, like the fly reverse proxy is never going to actually send any requests to it to begin with. So that should be working-ish. Right. Okay. Let's get back to our commits. So add prom client. I'm just going to do that as its own commit. We're going to have one for launch the metrics app. Let's just get rid of those things for now. Yeah. So let's say like add metrics router and enable in fly.toml. So we're going to be doing all of these as one commit. Yep, sure. And then this is like test metrics or test using custom metrics. Sure. Okay. And then last but not least, except it actually is least probably, is this manual update that I've been working on before the stream. So let's just do like manual updates. Okay. So, and the reason I made those commits is we want to actually deploy this now. Now, I could push it to GitHub and deploy it that way. But I do kind of feel like I might want to change these commits if things aren't working. So I'm actually going to do it locally. So maybe I didn't need to make the commits, but that's all right. We're going to do flight control deploy to actually deploy the app. Oh my God. Got to do an update, I guess. Yeah. So this is going to deploy the app. One of the things I like about Fly a lot is that it doesn't actually, basically Fly is based around mostly like Docker images and deploying those images. So when you have a file with some code in it, it's like you've got to build an image out of that, right? Using the commands in the Docker file or whatever. In this case, we're using a Docker file. The nice thing about Fly is that it builds that image actually in like a specialized remote builder. So it doesn't actually do it on your computer. Because I am using Windows, it can be kind of a pain to have to actually build the images locally and then like push them to a cloud repository. But it's also kind of a pain to have to like set up a CI/CD pipeline to handle all that. With Fly, it's kind of set up for you already. You don't need a CI/CD pipeline because it just has this remote builder thing that just does it. Same thing in GitHub, where it's like with GitHub Actions, it can easily just like kick off the build without needing a bunch of dependencies in your GitHub Actions pipeline, because all it needs to do is actually upload the files to Fly. And then Fly, does all the building and deploying. Very convenient. Anyway, so once this runs, we're going to want to see if we can actually get those metrics. So what will that look like? I'm not really sure. I would need to go to Explorer here and figure this out once it deploys, I guess. Okay, so it's deployed. And really, so now, for instance, if I go to like set.luketurner.org, this is the deployed app URL. Just as an example, if I do go to /metrics here, it's not going to, it's not going to find anything. It just redirected me to the home page again. If I'm signed in and I do that /metrics, I should get that 404. Yeah. But also being on the Today page here, I'm actually generating some of those metrics. Just refreshed it a few times. So now, it said it polls every 15 seconds. So once that 15-second window is up, we should see that test counter metric appear. Yeah, look at that. So just show me. Can you just show me that? show data. It might just take a minute. Let's see. Yeah, okay. So we actually have that metric in here. So this is kind of a cool thing to see. Basically what we can do now is publish these metrics from within our app code, and they're going to show up here in this Grafana instance. And then we can create our own dashboards and stuff based on that. So the first thing now we need to do is figure out what metrics we actually want to publish, right? So let's think about that. We could, like these default metrics, we could track, but the thing is Fly already has a lot of those default metrics, so I don't know if we need anything else in that regard. We do probably want to log like a metric for every time there's a route called. Might be nice. So let's kind of start with that. So if we do export const route metric new, this is going to be a counter because it's the number of times the route's called. Name is going to be num routes called. Sure. Help count of how many times the route was called. Let's do a route. And we could do like count routes called, sure. Label names, I don't know what this is exactly. But if this is talking about the keys that we're going to be putting label values in, we would have one here where it's like URL, let's say. Okay, fine. So let's actually get rid of the test counter one. And let's go back to the sets router, get rid of that because that's no longer a thing. So here is a nice advantage too, because we already have this controller method factory function. We can actually use that to add these metrics to every route automatically without needing to write code in every single route. So in here, basically what this is doing is it's returning a controller method that's calling the controller method that's passed into it and wrapping it with some error handling logic. So what we can also do is we can say, like before the controller itself is called, we could do like, what did we even call it again? Route metric. It's kind of a weird name maybe, but fine. And here we would, import that, and then we would do dot inc. And I think, yeah. So like the thing is we're going to want these labels as well, right? So it's going to be like inc URL is request.url, I think, or no, request.original URL. And then the value is just 1, right? We're incrementing it by 1. And really, maybe I can just leave that off because I think it defaults to 1. Okay. Cool. So now we're saying, hey, somebody hit this route, right? Fine. Now, I don't know exactly what the best way to do this with Prometheus would be normally, but I'm also going to make a route, or like route error metric. Or, maybe the best way to do this is actually to have a status code in the route metric itself. Let's see how this goes. Because basically what we want to be able to do is tell like, hey, how frequently are we getting errors and approximately what type? Obviously the status code is a pretty general thing, but it works, right? The problem is we don't actually know what the status code is going to be until the controller has already been executed. So instead of logging this at the beginning, we're going to do it at the end. And the status code is going to be, can I just check like resp.status code? Yeah, I think so. It says after the response header was sent, this property indicates the status code which was sent out. Hopefully that works. And then, we also would need to put that in the catch. Maybe I'll just put it in a finally block here. Finally. So it's going to always run after the controller runs. Yes. Okay. Let's see what that's like. And I might also do like a another label, which is whether or not it was authenticated. So like has user. I'm not going to have the actual user in there. But I am going to have like whether or not there was any user at all. Has user. I think we could get that from like request dot session. So like maybe I'll call it has session just to be like a little bit more accurate. And save that. Yep. I like these types. Like I like that I can be editing the label names here and that actually like affects the type here. It's really nice. And what are we complaining about? URL does not exist. I think I fixed that, right? Has session. It is a bit of an annoying error message though. So what are we actually complaining about here? Oh, Boolean is not assignable to string number or undefined. So this would have to be like rec.session, true, otherwise false, I guess. Sure. I don't know if there's like a standard for Prometheus where you should be using 1 or 0 for Boolean labels or what, but this seems like it's fine. Okay, so now we're going to be publishing this metric every time a route is hit. At least as long as we're using this controller method. So for instance, that's not going to publish a metric for the metrics router, just for the other ones, which is what we would like to see. Okay, so let's deploy this now. Because I don't have, I could also set up like a local something to ingest the Prometheus metrics being posted or, being made available at like localhost 3001. But I don't really want to do that. The easiest thing to do here is just going to be to deploy it, I think, and see what it looks like in Fly's managed Grafana. And going to do some cleanup of these commits probably as well. I don't know what this like singular metric route thing is, but it didn't seem like it was necessary. I also don't want the default metrics. Just going to get rid of that. Going to get rid of that. And let's adjust our commits here a bit. So going to undo this commit. Going to undo this commit. And I'm going to undo this commit. Now, when I'm undoing commits like this, it's basically a slightly more convenient version of doing a rebase. So I could do like an interactive rebase here. And instead of undoing those commits, I could reorder them, squash them, edit them, etc., and solve the problem that way. And VS Code actually has a really nice UI, like a custom UI for doing, or maybe it comes from GitLens, the extension, I don't know. But a nice custom UI for interactive rebase, but I'm just going to do this kind of manual approach of undoing all the commits and then sort of reconstructing them. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to go ahead and actually commit this manual thing separately first. And yeah, that doesn't really matter. So let's do manual updates. Okay. And then now we're probably going to do all these changes at once. So we're exposing the new metrics. And we're publishing metrics whenever a route is hit. So let's just do like publish custom metric whenever a route is hit. And it should have all of that testing code that we had should be gone now. Yep. Okay. And then let's take a look at what we've got over here now. So this would be count. It's not showing up yet. It was called count routes something. Oh yeah, I've got to actually, probably got to actually trigger some metrics here for it. So like this route, so that's the thing. If I go to like settings, that's like going to show up. Manage exercises. That should be fine. Okay, so now let's refresh this. Again, it'll take maybe 15 seconds for it to show up. Count routes called. And so here, we have these labels. I don't really need to distinguish by the labels yet. Oh yeah, one other thing, let's sign out here and see that the has session is correctly going to say false for that. Okay, let's run the query again. Last 15 minutes, seems fine. Okay, so now we have these routes. So there's has session true, settings, URL 304 today. So this is good. So we can see we have the status code. We're getting the URL. We're getting the has session, right? Let's run it again. There should be another one with has session false. It's just kind of trickling in here. Okay, let's see. Yeah, okay, so now we get that has session false. Cool. So kind of the reason we wanted to do that, by the way, is, with this app, it's not really going to be a problem, probably. But normally when you're deploying an app, it's like there's always going to be some people who don't have an account who are still just like hitting your routes. It's like a bot, or it's like a pen tester, or it's like some kind of like whatever. They're trying to like scan your app for vulnerabilities, all that type of thing. And that produces a lot of potential noise around errors, right? Like if you just naively, like anytime there's an error status code, like it should show up in this graph. It's like eventually the noise of all of the not actual users generating basically irrelevant errors can kind of overwhelm the like errors that your actual users are seeing. So with this has session thing, we can limit our panels to be like, hey, only show errors that are actually a user is experiencing and not some random bot or whatever. Okay, so let's actually make a dashboard here. I don't know, I've never done this before. So, oh, interesting. It looks like it is interesting. Like this dust metrics one is for a different app. So I guess maybe I have done this before. But that's kind of interesting to me because it seems like these like Fly Grafana dashboards are actually global to all of your Fly apps, which kind of makes sense, but it's not what I was picturing. I don't think there should be any weird information in here, so I'm not going to worry about that. Oh, you can do from application logs too? What? Now that's slick. What does that even do? Enter Lucerne query. I kind of just want to see. So if I look at the logs for my thing here, and this page actually doesn't work very well. I'm going to do it down here. Fly control logs. That should show me the history of it, right? Not just like maybe it's just tailing it. Well, let's look for something that we know we're going to log. So it's like example app listening on port 3000, right? I just kind of want to see if these logs are automatically getting published to Grafana somehow or what this is doing. I don't know. Let's tail 1000, tail 100. One sec, got a cough. Okay, I'm back. Phew. Okay, so this is not, let's look at metrics maybe, count. It's just not showing up with anything. I wonder if Fly has something to say about that. I'm kind of curious. Logging. I know Livetail logs. Search logs. You can access searchable logs in Grafana. So, I mean, it's like it should be working. Okay. Yeah, looks like it's working by default. That's good. I don't actually want anything based on the logs, though. I was kind of just curious about that. So the data source here is going to be Prometheus on Fly. The metric is going to be count routes called. And the label, let's say has session is true. And we will call this panel all routes called. Let's actually get rid of that for now. Just, yeah. And we can, let's see, apply changes and go back to dashboard, right? Okay, so all routes called. It's automatically splitting it up. It looks like by route, which is kind of nice. Or by, I don't know exactly what the right Grafana term is, but it's like each label is getting its own colored line. each like unique combination of labels. And like really we don't need I mean, it's fine, I guess. It's fine. So kind of what I'm thinking though is, we don't need the instance and host and region to really be differentiators here. Like if I do have other requests coming in from another instance, I don't want that to show up as like another line here. I want them to be grouped together. So I don't know if there's like a way to do that conveniently. Because again, I'm kind of used to statsd and like influx adapter in Grafana. So the Prometheus one is a little different, it appears. But anyway, there's aggregate, group by label. Can I group by multiple labels? Like if I do has session. Yeah, okay. So if I do has session and why can't I pick status code in here? Status code, I guess. I don't know why. And URL. And apply. Okay, so now that should be fine. And then I guess I also need to maybe adjust the actual label that's being displayed. The text for this, where does that come from? Okay, somehow that fixed it. Okay, just switching it to a custom label, and it defaulted something in, and it looks like the thing that it defaulted in is what I want. So this is like all routes called, right? And usually, we can maybe duplicate this, and we could have one where it is only So usually I would say like something where I say has session is true. I'm just kind of trying to think through what panels we actually want here. And status code is, can I do greater than? Greater than? Doesn't really look like it. There's not equals, there's the weird tilde thing, I think does a regex. So it's like the status code, it doesn't know it's a number. Maybe it needs to be like a numeric, some kind of numeric tag on the label, I wonder. How would I do that though? Labels. Strongly typed labels. I didn't even need to do that. It's interesting. But in theory, it would be like, okay, let's just do that. Default labels. So I'm thinking here there's, there might not be a type on the label, but maybe because the status code is, well, this says it's a number. So why is it coming through as a string? I don't know if that even matters or not. But let's just make this a little simpler for ourselves. We're going to add another label on this metric, which is like is error. Okay. And that's going to be either true or false. And we could say like is error rest.status code greater than 400, greater than or equal to 400. So what this is saying is if the status code that we sent back is greater than or equal to 400, then we say that it is an error, right? If it's 300 something, that's just a redirect. That's fine. If it's 200 something, obviously that's fine too. And it would be nice maybe if we could put this logic in Grafana somehow, but I don't really know. Maybe there's an operation for it, I guess. Like, what would it be? It's not really an aggregation. It's like a filter, some type of filter operation. We do have these. So like, let's see if we did greater than or equal to, huh. I don't know if that's really what we want. Okay, let's just get rid of that. The one thing I did notice with that though is it did say Boolean would be like 0 or 1. So let's actually do these as 1, 0, 0, 1. Okay. And let's deploy that. Fly control deploy. Right, because in our, we added is error here and here. Yeah, okay, let's deploy it. Just gonna continue building up this commit. And then we can see what it actually looks like in Grafana here. Basically, and I can kind of keep working on this and update the filter later. So this is going to be like route errors 4xx, 5xx. Yeah, fine. And let's get rid of that. Okay, and just save that. So we've got all routes called. I'm going to duplicate this again. So probably we're going to want something like all routes called. And then I kind of want one of these to be aggregated. So it's just like a numeric, all of the routes, not split out by each route like this one is. So if we get rid of the group by and we do an aggregator sum, right? And that should be something. Whoa. Let's just do last 30 minutes here. Yeah, okay. So that's not right though. problem here is the value is not like an instantaneous value. It's like aggregating. It's incrementing each time. So like this could be useful for having like a single number where it's like how many times has the route been called since the server restarted. But to get like an instantaneous number, I don't know if that's going to need to be a different type of route. Maybe that's not actually a counter at all. Maybe that's like a gauge or something. Or maybe the counter business needs to be like some kind of instantaneous flag on it. Sizes and frequencies of events. So maybe this is what we want actually. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe. I don't really. Summary? No. Let's try the histogram, see what it's like. I always get these kind of things mixed up, so gotta mess around with it a little bit and see what produces the right values in Grafana. Okay, so route metric. So I don't think I actually need to change. Oh, maybe I do. So what do I need to say here? Route metric dot observe. And then I need a number, 1. I don't know, it just doesn't feel quite right, does it? I don't know if it's a gauge or a histogram. Let's try histogram. Okay, so we're going to deploy it again. I did just finish deploying it, but I'm going to do it again and see what happens. Oh. So if we go back to our Grafana dashboard here, I can actually adjust this now, and I'm going to. So this should also have is error. Equals 1, because we switched those to 1. Okay, it's not working though. Oh, I got to generate some more metrics maybe. Sign in. Do the thing, click the things, make some numbers appear. Okie doke. Oh. It didn't save? I thought I saved those. No. Jeez. Okay. Let's try to do that again. So let's just call this all routes. Apply. So now I need to actually save the dashboard before I refresh the page. Okay, so we're going to call this set metrics. Sure, whatever. Okie doke. So for all routes, here we're going to do count routes called. There's not going to be any need to do a label anything. And we're going to just leave it at that. There should be data in there. Yeah. If I do last 60 minutes, yeah, so there is data. And if I, well, let's edit it here. So it's a little interesting here. So like these old metrics were published by the counter thingy. This new one here It's probably also published by the counter thingy, actually, because we haven't finished deploying. Okay, we just finished at some point. Let's go ahead and generate some more metrics now that that's done. So if I go like today page, manage exercises, settings, back to the today page, refresh it like 3 times. So that should be like 4 or 5 today page metrics. Again, you know, it's going to take 15 seconds for those to appear in Grafana. The house session, because we changed that from true to false to like 0 and 1, which I kind of don't really like. I sort of want to change that back, but we'll just leave it for now. That's why it's like showing up kind of separately here. And kind of what I want to see, come on, it's been 15 seconds, right? Oh, interesting. Okay, so now there's like these other metrics for a histogram, I guess. So let's do that. So if I do count, it's got the same thing going on here. If I do sum, again, the same thing. I wonder if it's even like possible to do what I want to do in Kubernetes or in Prometheus in the first place. Because like what I'm thinking is I want to know, okay, this route got called at such and such a time. It's not just incrementing the number. You would have to like decrement it afterwards too, but that's not really right either. Hmm. Hmm. What I want is like the frequency of the events. So that's kind of why I was thinking histogram would be good. But this is just showing me like the number. If I switch back to this one, that's like the old version. I wonder what the bucket one does. Let's just try that. Oh, geez. Okay. Definitely don't need that. I feel like histogram is not feeling like the right thing either here. So let's see if there's some interesting aggregation here, though. Like rate, like changes. Yeah, yeah, that's looking a little bit more something. So here we've got, so maybe I actually want it to be a counter and then I want changes. Maybe. But it should be okay using count like this too. But so kind of what I'm thinking here. So if we actually take a look at what this is saying, it's got the different pages, but like the today page, you know, we refreshed that a few times and it still is just saying 1. So it's like, yes, there was changes, but it's not, yeah, it's just the number of times its value changed. That's not really what we're looking for here. Maybe rate, the rate of change per second, average rate of increase. Sheesh. Okay, that sounds pretty good, maybe. Per per second average rate of increase. So now if I refresh this twice, and then we'll need to wait 15 seconds and see what it does. I don't really want per second though. I just want like delta or something. Calculates the increase. Calculates the difference. Yeah, okay, so this might be what I want, like a delta. Okay, so that makes sense. And the fact that it's a histogram seems now like that's probably not actually right, because we're just using this count metric for that anyway. So it might as well just be a counter. But on the other hand, it's working the way it is now. So maybe I'm just going to leave it. Yeah, so we can see like there was 5 hits on the today page at that point, and then there was 3 hits on the today page then. If I were to like go over here and refresh, then we should see like a 1 come up 15 seconds later. Okay, so let's just save this first of all. And back to the dashboard, save the dashboard. Okay, and then here we're going to duplicate it again. And then for the one that we're editing now, I'm also going to group it by, or I'm going to sum it. Just sum it. Yeah, okay. And what? We got negative numbers? That can't be right. That can't be right, right? Let's see. Let's look at the one that we were doing not summed. Refresh. Yeah, okay, so we get negatives. I guess because, I don't know, why would that happen? If I get rid of the delta, I guess because that went down from 8 to 1. And probably the reason it went down from 8 to 1 is it's possible that the pod was terminated and then restarted, which would clear like the in-memory number for the counter or whatever it was. And it seems like it wasn't super happy with that. I could do, what's this one? I delta, what does that mean? No. I think I might just want like, if I do increase, what does that do? 3, 1. It's kind of what I wanted, because I wanted to see that 1 show up. And this also does say breaks in monotonicity are automatically adjusted for. So that's what we want. Okay, I think that is what we want. Okay, so let's actually delete this other one now, because we have another one we're going to be copying. Duplicate this. And we're going to edit this to, now if we do a group, or not a group, a count, a sum. It should get me basically the numbers for all of the routes combined. So this is like anytime somebody hits any route, this should show a 1. what am I working on? I'm working on adding metrics to our app. So in the app itself, we've got this, in our controller method factory function. As soon as the controller is done, whether there was an error or not, we're publishing this route metric. And then in this Grafana instance, we're actually trying to sort of interpret those route metrics in a useful way. Because this is just a side project, I'm not super worried about exactly making everything perfect in Grafana, but I kind of just want to have some things set up so I can kind of at a glance see if things are weird, if something strange is going on, and kind of get some observability. So that's what we're doing. And we already have the metrics published, so I'm just kind of fiddling around in Grafana at the moment. I think to kind of take a step back and explain as well what I'm planning on doing with this dashboard, I think I want one panel where it's like, hey, this is all of the routes. This is whenever a route is hit, this gets incremented. And then I also want one where it's like all routes unauthenticated. And so that would be like with has session equal to 0. And there's no data there. If I were to sign out of my app, then just by loading this page, it should produce some data here. Oh, don't reload. Don't do that. It should produce some data here in like 15 seconds. Okay, so there's all routes unauthenticated. I'm going to duplicate this as well and do all routes authenticated. All routes authenticated. And so this one is where has session is 1. Is it, what's going on here? Okay, it just wasn't, I don't know, it didn't run the query. Right? Yeah, okay. Just, it's an interesting thing that I'm noticing because, I don't know, like with the InfluxDB adapter, I feel like these things are updating more, what do you call it? More kind of like instantaneously. With Prometheus, it's like I keep having to like manually refresh it to get the queries to actually run. They're not like updating live. Okay, so anyway, so we can see here like this one, that was where we hit the home page. It's still kind of weird because it's like, it's showing it for multiple like windows here. Could probably improve that somehow. But again, I'm not going to be too worried about it here. And then this over here, we're going to do like all routes grouped. I don't know, just call it something else. So these are like grouped, let's say grouped by route. So this is like for each route, we can see the number of times that that specific route was called. So here we're going to need to like do a group by group. Yep, by label. URL. It occurs to me I could also probably want to publish a method in here. Request.method. And need to add that to my list here. So we can see that. That's always kind of curious. We got a spammer in chat. Going to ban them. Okie doke. Says their post was restricted. So I don't know if you even saw that, but yeah. Okie doke. So all routes grouped by route. Actually looks pretty good. Kind of weird again how it's like just got these periods. I don't know, whatever. Something about the aggregation interval not matching up with the interval in the chart or something like that. Let's do another one here. So this one we're going to do like all routes, or like we'll call this like errors. Errors 4xx, 5xx. So this is going to be when is error is true, is 1, and has session is also 1. So kind of the idea here, I mentioned this earlier, but we don't want to include errors when they're not associated with a session, because those are probably just like some random bot trying to do something that doesn't work. And this group by, I'm actually going to get rid of the group by for this so that it's like a little bit more, you know, clear. It's not actually going to show up though, because we don't have anything that has errors. If I do 0, we can see like this is kind of what it would look like. If I do 1 now, then it's actually going to do what I want. Okay. Cool. Pretty simple. You know, one other thing that I kind of want to publish maybe is like the number of users. Number of users, because that's always something that I'm kind of interested in. Like, have people created accounts? And so to do that, we will publish another metric. So let's make another metric here. Users metric. And we would just call this count users or something. Number of users. And this would be a gauge, maybe. And let's see here. We're going to want to do that thing. I saw an example of that thing in here, this collect function. Yeah. And it's going to be async. So, well, it could be sync. Well, better to make it async. Okay. So here we're going to have like collect. Label names. Nope. Don't actually need any of those for this, I don't think. And so the current value here is going to just be like list all users, get all users. So to do that, not controllers, under models, let's make a new file here, actually call it user.ts. And we're going to like export async function, count users. And yeah, that's fine. Okay, so what is this going to do? It's going to do a database query. So we're going to like await, like return, await. How do we do it again? Oh yeah, db dot whatever. So db, import that, dot, is there a count? No, well, there's that dollar count thing. What does that do? I don't know. User table, just called user. So user as user table is kind of what I've been doing for this in the past, like that. Okay. And this is returning, what is this returning? A number, promise for a number. It's probably about right. Let me check the Drizzle docs though. Drizzle $count. So this is talking about like actually doing it in the thing. Utility wrapper of count star. Yeah, okay. So this is what I wanted to use. Okay. Okay, so it's just counting the number of users. Very simple. In the metrics thing here, we're going to await count users. And, I was thinking like, well, we could, maybe cache this value, but how do you know? I mean, it doesn't really matter because this is only going to do a database query every 15 seconds, if I understand things correctly. So caching it, overkill, basically. Okay, so with that, I think if we just do that now, like control deploy, we should get that metric starting to show up. And I'm also going to test out, let's sign in here. I'm going to test out creating an error and see if I can get that error chart to show something too, or that error panel. I always call them by the wrong things. So how would we do that? Let's see. If we go to, what's the easiest way to generate an error? Test. Okay, we created the exercise. Now if we go to the historical thing, we pick a look back window and we set this to not a number. Okay, we get an error. Kind of weird. This is actually a little weird. I thought it would be returning an HTTP error page because of this. So what are we seeing here? Pending 400. Okay. So if we look at the headers here, so the request headers has accept some stuff, but it accepts text HTML, but it doesn't accept either of these things, right? So why is it doing this res.send instead of this other one? Is what I'm trying to figure out. I don't know. I'll have to test that out locally. It's probably be easier than testing it in Fly. Let's finish with the metric stuff and then we can maybe take a look at that. So anyway, what we should see here though is actually these metrics now where it's like, hey, this user got some errors. Good to know. And then we finished deploying. Let's make a new panel here. This is, don't need to duplicate. We're just creating a brand new panel. And the metric is count users. And that's it. Probably, yeah, well, let's just do it like this. Num users. There's one. It's me. It's just me. Okay, save that. So this num users thing, I might put down here for now. Fine. Doesn't really matter all that much. Actually, maybe I'll put it over here. Kind of shrink it a bit. Put it over here. Yeah, cool. Fine. Save. Okay, Cool. So we've got some metrics, and these are kind of the main things that I'm going to actually care about. So I'm not going to add anything else at the moment. Eventually, maybe I will, but publish custom metrics for routes and total users. Okay, cool. Cool. So now we've got our metrics. Let's change our focus here, because I do want to figure out what was going on with that error handling thing. So let's take a look at that. So if we're local here, localhost 3000. And let's just duplicate it exactly the same way. Go over here and do like question mark lookback equals foo. And we get this error. The response here is this JSON object. So let's see what's going on. If I go to my utility thingy here, request.xhr. Let's see. I'm kind of curious. And this text event stream one, I don't even need anymore because that was there for Datastar. So the problem here, I mean, it's not an XHR request, right? Because it's actually doing the thing, which is fine. That's what we'd expect. And then what about this? Like accept JSON question mark? This returns the best match when true. So, but why does it return that? Because the request header accept doesn't include JSON in there at all. Oh, but it does include star-star. Okay. Okay. I kind of want to go based on this rec.xhr thing, if that's possible to do instead. Let's just try that for a moment. Going based on the content type is always going to be a little janky. Okay, so we get an error, right? This is what we expected to see. It's like actually an HTML error saying, hey, you did a thing wrong. What we want to make sure now is that we're not causing problems for other things. So like if we go to controllers, let's just say controllers sets, when we're updating a set, I'm just going to add another thing here like I've done before. Foo z.string. And just a random required validation parameter, because the front end's not sending that, it's going to generate an error. And so we get that error. Now here, well, let's see what we're logging first of all. So XHR again is false, which is annoying. Right? Let's restart this. Make sure I'm reading that right. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so I don't know what that XHR is getting set from. I mean, this is an XHR request, right? So I don't really know. I don't know. What we could do is like if this had like text HTML or something, or maybe just HTML, then like if we were to do this again, 1233. What is the best way to tell? I mean, I could have to check the request content type itself, maybe. Like, if request dot content type dot header content type application JSON. That's going to be one way to do it, right? Where here it's going to return a JSON response. Whereas for the other thing, if I go in a new tab over here and do like, and look back ASDF, now we get that error because it's not JSON. That's one way to do it. So let's go with that. Seems fine. Okay. So here we're going to be doing that. Get rid of this test. Okay, so update error response content type selection. Okay, sure. Alrighty, so let's check some things off. So what did we do? We did monitoring. Basically, that's it. Cool. And I'll get rid of that here as well. Cool. Okay. How are we doing timing wise? Getting close to 2 hours here. So again, when we're getting close to 2 hours, you know, I kind of want to see if there's something relatively small I could pick up. Feeling like these might not be that small. But yeah. Yeah, probably a little too complicated. What I could work on maybe is the manual. So maybe I'll spend some time on that and then we can call it a day. Okay, so I did do some updates on the manual already. Kind of giving a quick introduction. So log in with your GitHub account, create your exercises that you want to track, and log your exercises. And then I would say like, I might actually just put this here. Get rid of that, seems redundant. This also seems redundant now. Set supports the following types of parameters. Sure. Maybe I will have that under like exercises, units, maybe I'll have a setting or a section for like managing user data. And I could say data. In the settings page, let's copy this. You can export and or delete your user data. Note that deleting your data is permanent and cannot be undone. Exporting the data, exporting data. Let's say exported data includes. Got to think about how to word these things. Exported data. So what does the exported data include? Includes your user's settings is what this is basically. Your exercises and the sets you've recorded, all of your historical sets. Yeah. Okay, where's my manual page? Here we are. User settings, units, etc. Exercise metadata, and all of the historical or all of the logged sets for all your exercises. Okay. What else do we want to put in here? Anything? Let's see. There's mobile. I don't know. That doesn't really warrant a section. Maybe I'll just put some notes in here. Set is designed to work both on your desktop I don't know. It's hard to be non-exclusive because you're like, well, it works on your desktop. It's like, well, what about my laptop? What about my tablet? Is designed to work, or is designed to be mobile friendly. Let's just say. Phone or desktop, whatever. Okay. Part of the point of putting things like that in my manual, by the way, you might say, well, a regular user doesn't really care about that, or they can just tell whether it works or not by trying it, which is true. But, the manual is available to non-logged in users as well. So part of the point of having the manual is like if somebody's just curious, but they don't want to actually create an account, they can look in here and see, maybe a little bit of detail about what features are available and stuff like that. Speaking of features, is there anything else that a user is going to need to know in order to use the app? Maybe I'll actually just add that as a thing here. Free, open source, and mobile friendly. Okay. And then I'm going to add maybe some sections for each page. So like managing exercises. The manage exercises page can be used to create, adjust, or delete exercises. Note that deleting an exercise will permanently remove, man, it's hard to talk and type at the same time. Deleting an exercise will permanently delete all historical data associated with that exercise as well. You can change the parameters associated for an exercise at any time. Historical data for that exercise will include an empty value for any parameters added after the data was recorded. Next to each exercise in the list is a button to view historical trends and to view plots and tables of historical data. By default, this page shows you the last year. But you can adjust the look back window including using all time look back to see all your data. Okay. Could add a thing for like the today page, today logging page. The today page is used to log new sets for your exercises. Changes made to sets are saved automatically. This is saying that you don't have to like submit them. As soon as you change the value in the input, it's automatically saved. The order of the sets can be adjusted with drag and drop in case you forgot to log something and need to move. Well, let's just leave that off. That's going to be adjusted with drag and drop. I mean, if you forgot to log some data for an earlier day, you can click the date in the today page and choose a different day. Or you can click the date in the today page to log data for a different day. You can choose configure what units. Let's add something here as well. There are two types of units. Weight units, pounds versus kilograms, and distance units, miles versus kilometers. the default is pounds and miles. Maybe I should say the defaults are. The default units are pounds and miles. When you switch units, any historical data is automatically converted to the new unit. Okay. Okay, well, that's a little something. Let's see what that looks like here. Let's open our manual. So we've got our nice disclaimer. I always like to put these things because, nobody really knows what my plan is for this. I'd like to make it clear. I'm just going to put it out there, and I'm not going to guarantee it's out there forever. Okay, so stumbled upon the manual for set, blah, blah, blah. That stuff was all kind of already there. Parameters, more than one parameter per exercise, the following types of parameters. Managing the Manage Exercises page can be used to create, adjust, or delete. Deleting an exercise will permanently delete all historical data. You can change the parameters at any time, blah, blah, blah. Button to view plots and tables of historical data, show you the last year. The Today page is used to log new sets. Units, you can configure what units the app has in the settings page. There are two types: weight, pounds versus kilograms; distance, miles versus kilometers. Default units are pounds and miles. In the settings page, you can export and or delete your user data. Note that deleting your data is permanent and cannot be undone. Okay, seems all right. I might put these in little notification windows here, actually, like that. Maybe that could be like is danger. Okay. And I might put a note about that here as well. Or, put this note into a notification. Yeah. Okay. Deleting an exercise cannot be undone. Okay. Okay. Yeah, sure. So let's commit that. More manual updates. More manual updates. Cool. And with that, we are a bit over 2 hours. And I think I'm going to wrap up. So let's do a push, git push. And, a while back we did set up that fly deploy pipeline from GitHub Actions. So just by doing that push, it's going to be deploying our latest updates. We did obviously deploy a lot of those manually as well in the process of testing out the metrics, but it's always good to get that deploy from your GitHub repo so you know that the code that was deployed is in sync with the code that's shown in the main branch of the repo, right? It's like that GitOps approach. Okay, so with that, trying to think if there's anything else I should say, but I don't think so. Time to wrap it up. Thanks, y'all. See you next week.